You know, like if you wanted to do something, you had a gun.
Yeah.
Why are you gonna come into God's house?
Once praised as a flashy preacher who lived like a celebrity, Lamor Whitehead is now facing a storm that seems impossible to escape. From shocking accusations and courtroom drama to public backlash that keeps growing louder, the self-proclaimed Bling Bishop has become the center of a scandal shaking both his church and reputation. Supporters are worried, critics are celebrating, and the future suddenly looks uncertain. But how did a man who once stood at the top fall into such serious trouble? And what hidden truths are now coming to light behind the headlines? The flashy bishop with shocking downfall. Lamor Whitehead quickly rose to internet fame as one of the most talked about and controversial pastors after videos of his flashy lifestyle spread across social media and television. Many people were shocked by what they saw, especially because he looked very different from traditional pastors who live simply. Whitehead often appeared in public wearing shining diamond chains, luxury watches, and expensive designer suits, while also driving high-end cars like a Rolls-Royce. His bold and flashy image caught attention everywhere he went, earning him the nickname the Bling Bishop, and soon millions were discussing him online. Inside his Brooklyn church, he preached powerful messages about faith, financial success, and overcoming hard times. He spoke directly to people living through poverty, violence, and daily struggles, promising that God could lift them into better lives. To some followers, he looked like proof that success and religion could exist together. They admired his confidence, his style, and the way he carried himself like a celebrity. But to many others, something about the image felt troubling. Questions slowly began to grow louder as critics wondered how a pastor serving struggling neighborhoods could afford such an extravagant lifestyle. Behind the public spotlight, serious problems were quietly growing around Lamor Whitehead. Reports of unpaid debts, lawsuits, financial disputes, and fraud accusations began surfacing more frequently. Investigators and journalists started digging deeper into his business activities, while some former supporters came forward with troubling claims of manipulation and dishonesty. As attention around him increased, so did public curiosity, with many people demanding answers about the real source of his wealth and how it was being earned behind the scenes. At first, Whitehead continued presenting himself as untouchable, appearing in interviews and online videos with confidence. But over time, the polished image that once fascinated the internet slowly began to fall apart. The flashy jewelry and luxury cars no longer impressed everyone the way they once had. Instead, they became symbols of growing suspicion and controversy. As legal troubles continued piling up, many people started wondering whether the man who preached success and faith had been hiding a much darker reality behind the glamorous image the world had come to know. The flashy lifestyle of Bishop Lamor Whitehead left his listeners divided and doubtful about his worth and how luxury defines a pastor. But what could give an insight into his real worth? And can preaching at the altar alone guarantee such enormous wealth? Or does it raise people's doubts about who he really is? Let's find out. The $1 Million Church Robbery. In July 2022, Lamor Whitehead suddenly became the center of worldwide attention after a terrifying moment inside his Brooklyn church was captured live on camera. During a sermon that was being streamed online, armed men stormed into the church, and chaos instantly erupted. Church members froze in fear as the robbers moved through the room, demanding expensive jewelry and valuables. Women, children, and families sitting in the congregation watched helplessly as panic spread across the sanctuary. The frightening scene looked more like something from a movie than a normal church service, making the footage impossible for people online to ignore. According to reports, the robbers escaped with jewelry worth more than $1 million, including luxury watches, chains, rings, and other expensive items connected to Whitehead and his wife. Within hours, Clips of the robbery spread rapidly across social media platforms, television programs, and news outlets around the world. Millions of people were shocked that such a violent robbery could happen inside a church during a live broadcast. For some viewers, the bishop appeared to be a victim of a traumatic and dangerous crime. Supporters defended him, saying nobody deserves to experience such fear while preaching in front of their congregation. But as the story spread, the controversy around Lamor Whitehead only grew louder. Many critics began asking why a pastor would own such large amounts of expensive jewelry in the first place. Some even went further, suggesting the shocking robbery might have been staged to gain attention, win public sympathy, or possibly benefit from insurance claims. Soon, social media turned into a heated battlefield, with people arguing non-stop over whether the incident was truly a tragic crime or something far more suspicious and carefully planned. Authorities later confirmed that the robbery was real, and arrests connected to the crime eventually followed. Even so, the incident changed public perception of Whitehead forever. Instead of calming criticism, the robbery pushed his lavish lifestyle into an even brighter spotlight. Suddenly, people everywhere were discussing his wealth, designer clothing, expensive cars, and flashy image more than ever before. What began as a horrifying church robbery quickly became another major chapter in the growing controversies surrounding the man the internet had already labeled the Bling Bishop. Rather than attract sympathy, the church robbery exposed the lavish lifestyle of Lamor Whitehead and raised questions about where his wealth actually came from. But could the sources of that money eventually begin to surface? And is Lamor truly using the wealth for the purpose it was intended for? Now, let's delve into the financial scandals. The growing storm of fraud accusations. As more people began paying attention to Lamor Whitehead and the controversies surrounding his lavish lifestyle, even more troubling accusations slowly started coming into the public eye. What once looked like the story of a flashy preacher living in luxury was beginning to turn into something far more serious. Former associates, critics, and people who once trusted him started speaking out with claims that painted a very different picture behind the cameras and designer suits. Among the most shocking accusations came from a woman named Pauline Anderson. According to court documents, Anderson claimed she handed Whitehead $90,000, which reportedly represented nearly all the savings she had worked years to build. She said he convinced her to trust him after promising he could help her purchase a home through one of his companies. For Anderson, the offer sounded like an opportunity to finally secure stability and build a better future. She believed the pastor had both the connections and business experience to make it happen. But according to her claims, the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. The promised home never materialized, the payments she expected reportedly stopped coming, and the money she trusted him with was allegedly never returned. The accusations immediately drew heavy public attention because they involved not just business disputes, but the loss of someone's life savings. Many people online reacted with anger and disbelief, especially because Whitehead often preached messages about faith, success, and helping struggling communities. As investigators and reporters looked deeper, even more legal troubles began appearing around him. Additional lawsuits surfaced involving unpaid loans, bounced checks, luxury vehicles, and failed real estate agreements. Each new accusation added another layer of suspicion around his financial dealings. Critics argued that the glamorous image he proudly displayed online was beginning to collapse under the weight of growing legal problems. For Whitehead, defending his reputation became increasingly difficult. The expensive jewelry, luxury cars, and celebrity-like lifestyle that once attracted attention were now raising even bigger questions. To many observers, the growing number of accusations suggested there might have been far more happening behind the scenes than the public had originally realized. A lady, among other critics, claims Lamor took advantage of her by collecting nearly all her savings with the promise of getting her a home, which turned out to be false. But could she be framing the bishop? Or will an investigation expose even more wrongdoing? And how cunning was the self-proclaimed man of God? Let's uncover the shocking details. The legal crisis that shook Lamor's empire. As the legal pressure continued to rise, the case surrounding Lamor Whitehead grew more serious and complex than many had first expected. What began as simple questions about his flashy lifestyle and wealth slowly turned into a heavy legal fight, involving federal investigators, court actions, and growing criminal accusations that deepened public concern. Prosecutors later claimed that Whitehead was not only dealing with financial disputes and civil lawsuits, but also facing allegations of intentional wrongdoing during active investigations. According to reports from authorities, he was accused of trying to extort $5,000 from a businessman. The claim suggested that he allegedly used pressure and influence in a way that crossed legal boundaries, raising even more concerns about his behavior behind the scenes. But the situation did not stop there. Federal investigators also accused him of misleading them during their official inquiry. One of the most serious claims involved his statements about a second mobile phone. Authorities believed this device could have contained important evidence connected to the case. However, they said he denied its existence or failed to fully cooperate when questioned. This detail quickly became a major focus because, in legal investigations, honesty and full disclosure are critical, especially when evidence could impact the outcome of a case. As these accusations surfaced, they added a much darker tone to an already growing list of controversies surrounding the bishop. What once looked like isolated financial disputes was now being viewed as part of a broader pattern of alleged misconduct. Each new claim made his legal situation appear more unstable and more serious than many observers had originally thought. Supporters and critics reacted strongly. Some people were shocked, struggling to believe that a religious leader could be involved in such allegations, while others pointed to the earlier scandals as warning signs they felt were ignored. Online discussions intensified as more details emerged, and the public image of Whitehead continued to shift under constant scrutiny. In the middle of all this, his once glamorous reputation was being replaced by court reports, investigations, and growing uncertainty about what the outcome would be. Federal investigators later alleged that the bishop built his lifestyle on deception and even misled authorities during questioning. But what could have given Lamor Whitehead the boldness to drift toward crime in the first place? Could he have had a criminal past? And does this suggest he may never have truly left that past behind? Let's find out. Lamor Whitehead before the pulpit. Long before he ever stepped into the spotlight as a bishop, Lamor Whitehead already had a past that raised serious concerns for law enforcement. Years before his rise in the church world, investigators linked him to a major identity theft case that involved stealing and misusing people's personal information. According to reports, this was not a small mistake or a one-time issue, but part of a larger scheme that affected multiple victims. Authorities claimed that stolen identities were allegedly used to secure loans and fund luxury purchases, including high-end vehicles and expensive goods. The operation, as described in court records, suggested a pattern where personal data was treated like a tool for financial gain. What made the case even more troubling was how the information was reportedly obtained. Investigators said Whitehead may have gained access to private customer details through his connections and his work as a mortgage broker at the time, which gave him access to sensitive financial records. In 2006, the situation reached a turning point when he was arrested. He was later convicted on multiple charges related to identity theft. The conviction marked a serious moment in his life, placing him on record as someone who had been found guilty in a federal criminal case. For many people who later learned about his story, this part of his history became a key point of concern. Years after completing his sentence, Lamor Whitehead publicly claimed he had turned his life around. He joined the ministry, became a pastor, and rebuilt his image around faith and change. In his sermons, He often spoke about forgiveness, second chances, and overcoming a troubled past. For a while, many people believed his story of transformation and saw him as proof that anyone could start over with faith and determination. However, critics and skeptics continued to question how deep that transformation truly went. They argued that a criminal past involving financial deception could not be easily separated from later controversies that followed him. As new allegations and legal troubles emerged in his later years, some observers began to see a pattern that made his past feel less distant and more connected to the present. Lamor was convicted after being found guilty of connections to multiple identity theft charges. But what was his childhood like that made him bold enough to turn to crime? Could his upbringing have shaped his criminal inclination? And does crime hinder his success in other dealings? Or is he simply an evil genius? Let's uncover the shocking details. The tragic childhood of Lamor Whitehead. Only when looking deeper into the early life of Lamor Whitehead does a fuller picture begin to form about the man he would eventually become. His story starts in 1978, marked by tragedy almost from the very beginning. As a baby, he suffered a painful loss when his father was killed during a police altercation. Growing up without a father figure, he was raised by his mother alone, who worked hard to keep the family going despite many struggles. His childhood was not easy. Life in his environment came with challenges, limited resources, and constant pressure to survive. But even in those difficult conditions, people around him noticed something different about him. He showed signs of intelligence, strong ambition, and natural talent in sports. He was not someone who gave up easily, and he often tried to push himself toward better opportunities. As he got older, his potential became clearer. He received scholarship offers for university, which showed that others believed he had a promising future. He went on to study subjects like accounting and videography, building skills that could have led to a stable career in business or media. Later, he continued his education in ministry studies at the New York Theological Seminary, taking a path that would eventually shape his public identity as a preacher. On paper, his story looked like a powerful comeback filled with hope and change. It seemed like a life where past mistakes turned into purpose, and struggle slowly became success. To many people, he appeared to be someone who had truly been given a second chance, with the opportunity to rise above his past and build a better, more meaningful future. However, as time went on, that hopeful narrative became more complicated. The promise of redemption began to fade under the weight of growing controversy. Instead of being defined only by his education and ministry, his name started appearing in headlines linked to lawsuits, criminal convictions, and financial disputes. What was once seen as a story of transformation slowly became surrounded by questions. People began to wonder about power, money, and faith, and whether his journey was truly one of change or something far more complicated beneath the surface. Beyond Lamor Whitehead, struggling through a difficult childhood and taking on responsibility at a very young age, how did those early experiences shape the man he eventually became? And are people truly convinced by his claims of redemption, or do they still question his controversial past? Let's find out. The rise of the Prosperity Bishop. After spending several years in prison, Lamor Whitehead was released in 2013, and what followed marked a new and highly visible chapter in his life. Instead of stepping away from the public eye, he came back with a clear and bold mission. He founded his own church called Leaders of Tomorrow Ministries, presenting it as a place where people could find hope, direction, and a fresh start no matter what they had been through. From the very beginning, his message was centered on change, success, and survival. He often preached about financial breakthrough, personal growth, and the idea that anyone could rise above hardship with strong faith in God. His words were direct and emotional, especially for people dealing with poverty, stress, and difficult life situations. For many who listened, his story felt real and powerful. He was someone who had gone through prison, rebuilt his life, and now stood before them as a preacher of second chances. His confidence and dramatic life story helped him quickly gain attention. People were drawn not only to his preaching, but also to the way he carried himself. He spoke with strong energy, dressed in expensive clothing, and openly embraced a lifestyle that looked far from the traditional image of a humble pastor. This made him stand out in a world where many religious leaders focused on simplicity and modest living. One of the most talked about parts of his ministry was his teaching about sowing seeds. He encouraged followers to give money to the church, explaining that these offerings would lead to blessings, success, and financial breakthroughs in return. For some people, especially those hoping for change in their lives, this message felt hopeful and inspiring. They believed they were investing in their future through faith. However, opinions were deeply divided. Some people admired Lamor Whitehead, seeing his rise as proof that someone with a troubled past could still change and succeed. Others remained doubtful. Critics questioned whether his constant focus on wealth, luxury, and fame truly reflected faith, or if it was more about turning religion into a personal brand for attention and influence. As his influence expanded, people became deeply divided about Lamor Whitehead. Some saw him as proof that anyone can change and rise again, no matter their past. Others viewed him with suspicion, believing he was more of a businessman than a true pastor, using the church as a stage for money, power, and attention. What do you think about what Bishop Lamor Whitehead is going through? Could he have been the architect of his own struggles? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.